On October 28th, 2021, Mark Zuckerberg stood before the world and announced Facebook's transformation. The company would rebrand as Meta. The future, he declared, would be the Metaverse. Within 1 year, Meta's stock would collapse 76%, erasing $650 billion in market value. This is the story of how a 2015 email, driven by fear, not vision, led to $73 billion in losses, mass layoffs of 21,000 employees, and a bet on technology that users never asked for. By late 2024, Meta faced a reality most technology companies never admit. They were building the metaverse, but nobody was showing up. Reality Labs, Meta's metaverse division, reported an operating loss of $4.4 billion on just $470 million in revenue. The numbers revealed the depth of the crisis. Reality Labs had accumulated $73 billion in cumulative losses since 2020. Meanwhile, Meta's core advertising business was thriving. Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp generated 99% of total revenue. Same company, same leadership, same economic conditions. The advertising platforms printed money while the metaverse burned it. Leadership faced a decision. In December 2024, Mark Zuckerberg convened executives to review Meta's 2026 budget. Rather than continue bleeding billions, they would slash the metaverse division by 30%. Layoffs would begin in January 2026. VR headset prices would increase. They would shift resources toward AI glasses and away from virtual worlds. The market's response was immediate. Meta's stock jumped 5% on the news. Wall Street wasn't mourning the metaverse's retreat. They were celebrating it. But the number that would define this era, $73 billion in cumulative losses, would suggest something had gone catastrophically wrong from the very beginning. On June 22, 2015, Mark Zuckerberg wrote a 2,500-word email that would determine Meta's fate for the next decade. The subject line, VR/AR strategy. The email revealed the true motivation behind what would become the metaverse. It wasn't about giving users something revolutionary. It was about fear. We are vulnerable on mobile to Google and Apple because they make major mobile platforms, Zuckerberg wrote. Facebook had nearly failed during the mobile revolution, becoming entirely dependent on platforms controlled by competitors. Apple and Google extracted 30% of every transaction. They could change privacy policies unilaterally, as Apple did in 2021, costing Meta an estimated $10 billion in advertising revenue. Zuckerberg was determined not to repeat that mistake. Virtual reality would be the next computing platform, and this time, Meta would own it completely. In March 2014, Meta acquired Oculus VR for $2 billion. Then came the pivot. In October 2021, Zuckerberg announced the transformation. Facebook would rebrand as Meta. The company would invest unprecedented resources into building the metaverse, a persistent virtual world where people would work, socialize, and shop digitally. Zuckerberg described it as the successor to the mobile internet. The company committed to spending tens of billions annually through Reality Labs. Wall Street's initial reaction was cautiously optimistic. Meta's stock peaked at $382 in September 2021, giving the company a market capitalization of approximately $1 trillion. Then the execution began, and everything started falling apart. By late 2021, Reality Labs was spending approximately $10 billion annually, but burning cash developing Horizon Worlds, Meta's flagship metaverse social platform. But adoption never came. Internal documents revealed that by October 2022, Horizon Worlds had fewer than 200,000 monthly active users. Most users who tried it never returned. The virtual spaces felt empty, the avatars looked awkward, and the experiences lacked any compelling reason to visit. Meanwhile, Meta's advertising business faced headwinds. Apple's iOS privacy changes dramatically reduced Facebook and Instagram's ability to track users. In February 2022, Meta reported that daily active users on Facebook had declined for the first time ever. The market reacted brutally. On February 3, 2022, Meta's stock crashed 26% in a single day, erasing $232 billion in market value, the largest one-day loss in stock market history. Mark Zuckerberg's personal net worth fell $31 billion in hours. The stock continued declining throughout 2022. By November, Meta's share price had fallen to $88, down 76% from its peak. Market capitalization collapsed from $1 trillion to approximately $250 billion. Investors were furious about the metaverse spending. Meta was pouring over $10 billion annually into Reality Labs while the division generated under $2 billion in revenue and showed no path to profitability. Zuckerberg's answers remained vague. The metaverse was a long-term bet. This required patience and sustained investment. Wall Street's patience was exhausted. In November 2022, Meta announced its first mass layoffs in company history. Approximately 11,000 employees, 13% of the workforce, would be terminated. But notably, Reality Labs spending continued unchanged. Then came 2023, which Zuckerberg declared the year of efficiency. In March 2023, Meta announced another 10,000 layoffs. Combined with closing 5,000 unfilled positions, the total reduction reached 21,000 jobs, approximately 25% of Meta's workforce. Wall Street applauded. Investors weren't celebrating innovation. They were celebrating layoffs. But Reality Labs continued losing money. In 2022, the division lost $13.7 billion. In 2023, $16.1 billion. In 2024, $17.7 billion. The losses weren't declining. They were accelerating. Over 5 years, Reality Labs had lost $73 billion, with virtually nothing to show for it. Quest headsets dominated the VR market with 75% market share, but VR itself remained a niche market, generating less than 1% of gaming industry revenue. The metaverse vision that Zuckerberg had staked Meta's future on wasn't materializing. Then in December 2024, the pivot became official. Meta would cut Reality Labs spending by 30%. The company would shift resources toward AI-powered smart glasses, particularly the Ray-Ban Meta collaboration. The metaverse, as Zuckerberg had defined it in 2021, was being abandoned. During Meta's fourth quarter 2025 earnings call in January 2026, Zuckerberg never mentioned the word metaverse. The term that had defined the company's identity for 4 years had been erased. January 2026. Meta exists in a paradoxical state. The company is extraordinarily profitable, reporting net income exceeding $14 billion quarterly from advertising. The stock trades near all-time highs around $600 per share. But the Metaverse division that consumes $73 billion has failed to deliver on any of its promises. But the fundamental question remains unanswered. Why did Meta spend $73 billion on a vision that users never wanted? The data available today points to 3 critical mistakes. First, Meta's metaverse strategy was driven by corporate fear rather than user needs. The 2015 email reveals the truth. Zuckerberg wasn't building the metaverse because customers demanded it. He was building it to escape dependence on Apple and Google. The iPhone succeeded because it solved problems users had with existing phones. Google succeeded because it delivered better search results. Facebook itself succeeded because it connected people in ways they couldn't before. Meta's approach was opposite. Leadership identified what the company feared and built a solution searching for a problem. Then they spent years and tens of billions trying to convince users they needed virtual worlds. The metaverse wasn't designed around user pain points. It was designed around Meta's strategic anxieties. Compare this to successful VR applications. Beat Saber succeeded because it made exercise fun. VR chat thrived by letting communities build their own spaces. Each succeeded bottom-up, driven by user enthusiasm, not top-down corporate mandates. Meta tried to will an entire platform into existence through spending. You cannot buy your way to the next computing paradigm if nobody wants to compute there. Second, Meta confused market dominance with market validation. Quest headsets captured 75% of the VR headset market. Leadership interpreted this as validation. But market share within a niche doesn't create a mass market. Quest's dominance reflected Meta's willingness to aggressively subsidize hardware. The company sold headsets at or below cost, hemorrhaging billions to capture share. But it didn't create demand for VR itself. The gaming industry generates over $200 billion annually. VR gaming represents less than 1% of that total. Meta owns 75% of 1%, a dominant position in an irrelevant market. When the iPhone launched, it didn't need to subsidize hardware to gain adoption. Users wanted smartphones. With VR, Meta created artificial demand through pricing below cost. The moment subsidies reduced or prices increased, as announced in December 2024, adoption stalled. VR market dominance wasn't evidence of an emerging platform. It was evidence of Meta's willingness to lose more money than anyone else to dominate a market that consumers largely didn't care about. Third, Meta had no realistic timeline or success criteria for the Metaverse investment. When pressed by investors, Zuckerberg consistently described the Metaverse as a long-term investment requiring patience. But long-term without defined milestones becomes indefinite. After spending $73 billion over 5 years, what would success have looked like? Meta never clearly articulated this. Without defined goals, the investment became unfalsifiable. No matter how much money burned, leadership could always claim they were building for the future. Compare this to Amazon's approach with AWS. Amazon spent years investing in cloud infrastructure at a loss, but they had enterprise customers using the services. Revenue grew consistently. The path to profitability was visible. Meta's Metaverse showed no such trajectory. After 5 years and $73 billion, Horizon Worlds had fewer active users than many mobile games built with tiny fractions of Meta's budget. There was no evidence that another 5 years would change the fundamental dynamic. Users didn't want to live in virtual worlds, and no amount of spending could change that. Here's what we know today. In 2015, Mark Zuckerberg wrote an email outlining his fear of platform dependence on Apple and Google. In 2021, Meta went all in on the Metaverse, rebranding the company and committing tens of billions annually. By 2024, the results were definitive. Reality Labs had lost $73 billion cumulatively. Horizon Worlds never achieved mainstream adoption. VR remained a niche market. The Metaverse vision failed. In December 2024, Meta announced a 30% cut to the Metaverse budget. In January 2026, Zuckerberg stopped saying the word Metaverse entirely. The lesson for other technology companies: fear is a terrible foundation for strategy. Zuckerberg feared platform dependence, so he built an alternative platform. But he built it for Meta's needs, not users' needs. And users refused to participate. Spending does not equal progress. Meta invested $73 billion into the Metaverse over 5 years. For context, that's more than NASA's entire annual budget. It's enough to have acquired Netflix, Spotify, and Airbnb combined. All that capital generated minimal user adoption, minimal revenue, and a division that after 5 years was losing more money annually than when it started. The cost wasn't just financial. 21,000 employees were laid off, while Metaverse spending continued unchanged. Workers building profitable products lost their jobs while the company poured billions into virtual worlds nobody visited. And market dominance without market relevance is meaningless. Meta achieved 75% market share in VR headsets, while VR itself remained under 1% of the gaming market. Dominating a market nobody cares about is not success. It's expensive failure disguised by selective metrics. The difference between vision and delusion can look identical from the outside. Vision is building something users will want even if they don't know it yet. Steve Jobs envisioned the iPhone before users knew they needed pocket computers, but he built it by understanding what frustrated people about existing phones. Delusion is building something you want users to want regardless of what they actually need. Zuckerberg envisioned the Metaverse before users wanted virtual worlds, but he built it by projecting his corporate fears onto consumer behavior that never materialize. Meta made a choice in 2015. They would invest everything necessary to own the next computing platform and escape platform dependence. In 2024, that choice produced $73 billion in losses, mass layoffs, and a Metaverse nobody wanted. Mark Zuckerberg will find out in the coming years whether the AI glasses strategy succeeds or whether Meta's pattern of building solutions searching for problems continues. But the number $73 billion suggests they better hope the former proves true. Because if it doesn't, the story of
This
Meta's metaverse will stand as
is
technology's
Meta
most expensive
Ray-Ban
lesson
display.
in what happens when corporate fear drives product strategy instead of user needs.